Welcome to episode number 8 of the Sizzle Basketball Podcast. Today I will be talking about two teams, again, one in the East and one in the West. And today the two teams are the Mavericks and the Hornets. I'll start with the Dallas Mavericks first. So the Mavericks have been playing really good basketball the last month and a half or a little more, if anything. And with that, it puts them all the way to number 5 in the West right now. They're 36-28. And they are tied with Portland for number 5 and 6, but they have the advantage in the tiebreaker. And they're also tied with the Lakers at 7, but like I said, they also have the advantage with the Lakers in the tiebreaker. So it seems like, looking at all the teams' remaining schedules, the Mavericks, Portland, and the Lakers, that eventually, when the season's over, that the Mavericks, in my opinion, will either be 5 or 6, which is good because it means that they won't have to do the play-in game. So they will just be able to be right into the playoffs and not even have to bother with a playing game. As I mentioned, the last month and a half or 2 months, the Mavericks have been playing really well. Porzingis has been hurt for a little while. He's been out for 6 or 7 games. He had right knee soreness not too long ago, and he wasn't able to suit up for the team last night. When they played Sacramento, they lost by 12, but he wasn't able to suit up for them. And I know they're missing him a lot right now. He's a guy who really helps his team when he's healthy, but the issues are the injuries. He has to be able to stay healthy more often because this is not the first time he's been injured this year, and we know in the past years how much he's been injured. So he's a guy who I want to talk about really quick after I talk about his injuries, who is just way too injury prone in my opinion, and maybe this is the guy that they look at trading in the offseason because of how injury prone he is, but maybe not, because they might not get as much back in return because of the injury history. But I think we all know when Porzingis is healthy, he really helps his team. He adds another dimension to this team's ability to shoot and spread the floor. And he also adds another dimension rebounding-wise and shooting-wise. So everything that Porzingis gives them when he's healthy is what they're going to need going into the playoffs. So we've seen guys like Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dorian Finney-Smith step up in the absence of Porzingis, and also guys like Maxi Kleber. But they're going to need Porzingis come playoff time for them to actually do something in the playoffs or be considered as contenders, in my opinion. So definitely something that we should all keep an eye out on. And I know the Mavericks are keeping an eye on the situation, and they're hoping he comes back in the next game or two, which would be a great thing because the next game they'll play the Miami Heat tomorrow night. So hopefully he's able to suit up for that game. They don't know yet. And then on to more things talking about the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, Luka has been unbelievable this year. He's one of the MVP candidates again this year. He's playing at a really high level, shooting the ball really well again, taking over games. He's become more clutch in the moments that they need him to. He's become more of a takeover guy where you can just put the ball in his hands and he can just take over the game. So, obviously we know he's one of the top 10 players in the league. There's no debating that. He had 20 assists 2 nights ago against the Wizards. So again, just with his ability to score, rebound, pass, he does everything. And he is showing why he is one of the best players in the world again. And he does it with great efficiency. So, when you really think about it, you could imagine this Mavericks team without Luka. And I think a lot of the things last year, a lot of the critics last year were saying that maybe Luka was a guy who couldn't close games. But obviously he's proven that wrong this year. He's hit, game winners against Boston. And obviously in the playoffs last year, we saw the game winner against the Clippers. So, and he's hit a lot of big-time shots, big moments this year. So he's shown an ability, as I mentioned earlier, to take over games and to just, you put the ball in his hands in the last minute or two, he's going to either make a play for someone else or make a play for himself. So that's what makes him one of the best players in the world. And Dallas has to continue to ride him throughout the playoffs and, put the ball in his hands every play, 24/7, and just make sure that he can continue to get other guys involved and continue to get score for himself. Obviously, this is a team that has an opportunity, in my opinion, to contend. They have a lot of shooters. Luka has a lot of guys around him that can help him, take his game to another level. And that Luka also takes a lot of other guys around him. That he takes their games to another level, in my opinion, as well. So, no, obviously this is a team come playoff time that will make noise in the Western Conference, in my opinion. They're a sleeper team. I think they can do some damage in the West. Like I mentioned earlier, though, they're going to need Porzingis to be active and be healthy. And if he's not, it's going to be more of a struggle than it would be, with the current roster they have right now. But, yeah, with Luka and Porzingis in there, it's going to be tough for teams, in my opinion. And right now they're the 5 seed, so they would play the Clippers in the first round. And they're, about 7 games behind the Clippers, so they're not going to be able to overcome that. But they will be able to at least hopefully stay within that 5 to 6 range so they don't have to play the play-in game. And in my opinion, they played the Clippers last year in the playoffs. in the first round, so they would have to play him again. In my opinion, I think they would beat the Clippers if they had a healthy Porzingis. That's going to be the key. You're going to need a healthy Porzingis because Luka's going to show up, and Luka's taking his game to an even better level this year. And they lost last year 4-2 in a series that a lot of people thought could have gone 7. So now you take this team with Luka even better. Tim Hardaway's playing better. Dorian Finney-Smith's playing much better. You just need a healthy Porzingis, and this team can beat the Clippers, in my opinion. On to Dorian Finney-Smith really quick. He is, in my opinion, one of the X factors of this team. In my opinion, he's the best perimeter and post defensive player on this team. And he's turned himself into an even better three-point shooter this year. He's shooting around 39%. So this is a guy who obviously is going to be huge for this team come playoff time because he's the guy that you're going to put on the opposing team's best player throughout most of the game. So he's a guy, and he rebounds well too. So he's a guy that will be a really big X factor for this team come playoff time, and it's really good to see him playing this well and shooting the ball this well because last year you really looked at him as mainly a defender who could hit threes here and there, and now he's making around 2 threes a game and shooting 39%, like I said. So he's a guy who they can go to, in certain games, especially in the playoffs, and rely on him to knock down a couple of threes a game for them and really help this team on both ends of the floor. So yeah, he's one of the better two-way players on this team. So yeah, he's going to be a big factor for this team come playoff time. The performance of Dorian Finney-Smith. Next guy I really want to talk about is Jalen Brunson. He's one of the better bench players in the league, underrated playmaker. He can get guys involved. He doesn't turn it over a lot either, which is a really big key when you come off the bench to not come in and cause too many turnovers. And he's a solid shooter, and he's showing a great ability to get to the rim. And he's just a very high IQ player. He doesn't take any bad shots. He's very patient. He can run the offense off the bench when Luka comes out. So, Jalen Brunson has been great for this team. He's been even better this year. It's his best year in his career, in my opinion. He's shown when Luka's out, he can put up 20-plus point games with 5-6 assists. He's a pretty reliable defender. So, no, he is a guy who will be huge for this team come playoff time because they're going to need a guy who, when Luka comes off the bench, which he won't come off the bench much in the playoffs, but when he does come off the bench, they're going to need a guy who can come in and just make plays for others off the bench and score. So he is that main guy for that team. One of the more underrated players in the league, in my opinion. He's a guy who I know a lot of championship teams will love to have. So, the fact that Dallas has him right now is a big thing, in my opinion. The next guy I want to talk about really quick, I want to talk about one or two more players, and then I'll go into talking a little more. I mentioned it earlier, but I'll go into a little more depth about Dallas in the playoffs this year, what I think they can do, and then what they also need to do in the offseason, in my opinion. So I want to talk really quick about Josh Richardson. They acquired him this past year from the 76ers, and they were able to give away Seth Curry. A lot of people have not liked that trade on the Mavericks side, but I think it's a pretty good trade in my opinion. I do think Seth Curry's a much better scorer and shooter, but I think Josh Richardson gives them something that they need, and he gives them an ability to play defense. He's the second best defender on this team, not far behind Dorian Finney-Smith, and he gives them, like I said, an ability to lock up opposing teams' star players or superstar players, right? He gives them that ability, and that's something that the Mavericks didn't have last year. They had one of the better offenses in the league last year. So obviously, the offensive end of the floor wasn't an issue. Is that their defense was towards the bottom of the league all year last year, and you've seen this year, with the addition of Josh Richardson, and now, Dorian Finney-Smith takes steps forward defensively. Even Luka's taking steps forward defensively. You've seen this team now. They're ranked number 8 defensively in all defensive categories combined. They're ranked number 8 in the league, which is a big thing, especially come playoff time. They have more bodies to put on guys than they did last year, which is a big thing because last year I felt like the biggest reason they lost to the Clippers was because of their inability to play defense. And they have, added guys and traded some of their offensive players like Seth Curry to go out and get defensive lockdown guys who can still, give you a decent amount of points a night. A guy like Josh Richardson, who will give you 12, 13 points a night but give you great defense. And I think that's a good exchange for Seth Curry, in my opinion. So I think the Mavericks ended up winning that trade. As great as Seth Curry is for Philly, you have to understand Philly didn't need another defensive player. They have so many defensive players, right? They were okay to get rid of, it was okay for them to get rid of Josh Richardson. They didn't really need him. They needed another shooter and another guy who could score, and that guy was Seth Curry. So really, it's a great trade for both teams. But in my opinion, it's a win for the Mavericks because the Mavericks got something they needed more desperately than the 76ers needed. The Mavericks got a good lockdown defender who can really help them come playoff time. So really interested to see how Josh Richardson takes his game to another level in the playoffs because I believe he will. And then really quick, I want to talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. for a little bit. We know Tim Hardaway Jr.'s a great scorer in this league. He's a bucket. He can score at a really high level. He's improved defensively this year, but he still has a couple steps to take forward defensively because when you think about it, Tim Hardaway Jr. has the build to be a great defensive player, to be a great 3-and-D type of guy. And I wouldn't necessarily only categorize him as a three-point shooter on offense. I think he can do a lot more. He's improved his ability to put the ball on the floor, get to that mid-range area, get it to the rim, get to the free throw line. But he can, he has the body, as I mentioned, to be a great defensive player as well. He's 6'6" and he's 205. But it's really, it's really not that when you look about it. He's built pretty well. And, he's shown, like I said, flashes defensively this year, and he's gotten better. But I think just more consistently on the defensive end, more consistency on the defensive end for Tim Hardaway Jr. will help his team even more. But, Tim Hardaway Jr. is like the dark horse for this team. He's a guy who, in my opinion, is their third best player. I think we can all agree to that. And he's a guy who this team is going to need playoff time to, shoot the ball really well, because he's a guy who a lot of times when Luka or, Porzingis aren't getting it going, he's a guy who can come in and just give him 17, 18 every night, and a lot of nights he can give him more. He's a guy who, when he gets hot, he can't miss. So hopefully you get a lot of those type of games for him in the playoffs for Dallas, because I know if you get those types of games, you'll see Tim Hardaway's true value. He's a guy, in my opinion, who should average 20-plus in the playoffs. You should have 3 20-plus scores in the playoffs. Porzingis, Tim Hardaway, and Luka, of course. So, no, if Tim Hardaway plays at a very, very high level for this team, this is a team that could be very dangerous in the playoffs, right? Obviously there's a lot of other X Factor guys that I named, but he's another one of the X Factor guys. He's a guy who they're going to need to play really well. He can't put up 24 one game and then put up 12 the next game. They're going to need him to give him, Dallas is going to need him to give them a consistent performance every night on both ends of the floor. So if he's able to do that and he can show everyone his full potential, like I said, Dallas becomes even scarier come playoff time. So for this team going into the offseason, it's going to be an interesting offseason for Dallas, in my opinion. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's making $18 million per year this year, and then next year he will be a free agent, just a complete free agent, no team or player option. He'll be a free agent, so he'll be able to have the option to decide, what he wants to do. And then also you have Josh Richardson, who has a player option next year, so he can opt out of that. You don't know what happens with his player option. So if Dallas was able to if Dallas decided not to re-sign Tim Hardaway Jr., and not re-sign J.J. Redick, who I forgot to mention is also a free agent, making around $13 million a year this year, and then let Josh Richardson walk, they could save around $35 million in cap space going into next season, which right now they're at the full cap. They don't have a lot of money to really spend on anything. But if they were able to do this and, let those guys do the things that I mentioned, they would be able to save $35 million in cap space, which means realistically, if you look at the contracts for the next year, more guys are up even then. They would be able to save a ton of money and then take that money and go spend it on a player, big-time player, if they think that it's worth getting rid of Tim Hardaway Jr., J.J. Redick, and Josh Richardson. And there's a lot of interesting free agents next season that I think Dallas could really keep their eye on. You have Chris Paul, who will be a free agent. Maybe you bring him in, you put him next to Luka. That could be scary, with both of their abilities to play, make, and just be leaders. You also have Kawhi Leonard, which I think would be the jackpot. I think they have a chance to go out and get Kawhi Leonard. You pay him $35 million a year. Maybe you trade a couple of other guys. You're able to eventually maybe make a contract where you could pay a guy like Kawhi almost $35 million a year, or around there at least, and that would be huge for this team. The other free agents I'm looking at are pretty intriguing, but it doesn't seem like guys that would really be able to take this team to another level, because a lot of people think they need a third guy, and I believe that as well. Because your first option is Luka and then Porzingis. A lot of people think they need a third guy. So if you were to go out and get Kawhi Leonard, that would obviously be your third guy. Obviously, you would have to, get rid of Josh Richardson and Tim Hardaway and, J.J. Redick. But I think it's worth it, in my opinion. As great as those three players are, I think it's worth it, obviously, to go out and get Kawhi Leonard. If they were able to go out and get Kawhi Leonard with, the roster they have and the coaching they have with Luka and Porzingis, and, you'd still have Jalen Brunson coming off the bench, it would make this team instant favorites, in my opinion. I would predict them to win the whole thing. So, yeah, make sure that that's something that I think we as NBA fans should keep an eye on, because there's definitely a good chance that they let those three guys, walk and do their thing, and they go out and they try their hardest to get Kawhi, because Kawhi might not be happy with the Clippers, especially if the Clippers lose in the playoffs this year. He might be ready to, jump ship, because not a very young team. You can also make an argument that it's not a very well-coached team, so Kawhi could be ready to jump ship if it doesn't work for the Clippers this year. So, make sure to keep an eye out on that. One more quick thing I want to mention. When I talked about Porzingis a little earlier, I talked about the possibility of them trading him this offseason. Let me go into further detail with that. There is an opportunity or a chance that they do trade Porzingis, in my opinion, based on his injury history the last couple of years and just based on his injury history and his whole career. But, you look at what they could possibly get back for him, it might not be that much because of his contract, number one, and number two, because of his injury history. So, he's a guy who, in my opinion, yes, they could look to trade him, as I mentioned, but I don't think they'll end up trading him. I think they'll try to end up going for a guy like Kawhi or Chris Paul, preferably Kawhi because of his age and he's better. And they'll try to probably keep Porzingis, in my opinion, and just, pray and hope that Porzingis can stay healthy so they can build a big three in Dallas. So that is going to wrap it up today for the Mavericks portion of the segment. And now I'm going to get on to the Charlotte Hornets portion. This season, the Charlotte Hornets have surprised a lot of people. Obviously, I don't think anybody predicted that they would be this good. They are the 8th seed currently in the Eastern Conference. So, this is a team that is now 2 games behind 500, but they're still the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. LaMelo Ball played his first game on Saturday against the Pistons. He finally came back. Well, his first game from the injury that he had that put him out for about a month and a half. And they, originally said he was going to miss the whole season. So it's good to see him back for this team. They're kind of easing his minutes in so far and just hoping that they can have him 100% ready for the playing game, which they will be in. They'll definitely be in the playing game. They're, high enough above the 11th seed in Toronto right now where they won't go down to 11. The worst is they go down to 10. So they'll still be in contention for that playing game. So obviously the hope is that they have LaMelo fully healthy for the playing game. So obviously, like I said, they're bringing him in slow, and then eventually they'll bring him into normal speed and normal minutes, I would think, in the next couple games. This year for LaMelo, he's obviously been great. I think we all know that he's shown his ability to affect the game in many different ways, whether it's passing or scoring or rebounding or just an ability to, just take the game over at times, right? He's been able to show that at this young of an age in his rookie year, which is crazy to think of because I think a lot of us didn't really know how great he would be. And I think now we're seeing, what kind of potential he has and how great he has been in his first year. And you can see the effect that he has, on the game. You can see when since he was out, how much different this team plays. They still were able to grab some nice wins, but, they just don't play at the same level when he's out as they did when he's there. So obviously they're really happy to have him back. But, he was Rookie of the Year, obviously, before the injury. Now it's probably going to be Anthony Edwards because LaMelo missed, almost 2 months, about a month and a half. So it will probably end up being Anthony Edwards. But in my opinion, LaMelo is the best rookie this year, barring the injury. So, for LaMelo to be able to have an effect in the game in this many ways already this young is huge, especially when you talk about the passing. A lot of guys can score at his age, and he's showing an ability to score. He may not be the craziest scorer, but I think eventually come time will be a very solid scorer. But, the biggest thing, as I just mentioned a minute ago, is the passing. He's shown an ability to have great vision at this young of an age, which is a big thing because a lot of guys at this young of an age can't score, but they can't pass the ball that well. He makes guys around him better. You've seen how much better he's made Bridges in the pick and roll. Him and Bridges in the pick and roll has been great this year. You've seen how much better, he's been able to make guys down low, even like Cody Zeller. He's even helped him out down low too to get more looks, and to make more, buckets that are easier, right? Instead of having so many tough baskets. And that's one thing that I think Charlotte struggled with last year, in my opinion, is they didn't really have a great playmaker. Devontae Graham is a solid playmaker, but I don't think he's at the level playmaking-wise as LaMelo is. So it's great for his team to have a great playmaker, and they add him. And this is a very young team that has a very interesting future. And another guy in this team that has been playing really well lately is Miles Bridges, right? Obviously, you see all the highlights on House of Highlights and Bleacher Report of all his posterizing dunks and his crazy alley-oops. But you look at the way he's been playing since LaMelo's been out. It's not just the dunks and the crazy threes. It's his ability to put the ball on the floor. He's improved that. We know he's got a really quick first step. He's been playing much better defensively. He's been a good defensive player for this team, which this is the end of the floor that this team kind of lacks. So having him out there playing good defense really helps this team. And you've seen him, like I said, since LaMelo's been gone, he's put up 20 plus a lot of nights, and he's showing a consistency to score. And obviously those aren't just dunks, they're just showing you the dunks on in the media, but obviously those are also, he's also showing his ability to shoot the three ball more consistently than ever and also get to that mid-range area, which he's been very lethal there at times. This is a guy who's in his 3rd season. He's 23 years old, and he has a qualifying offer coming up on his contract for the 2022-2023 season. So this is a guy, obviously, that, if a team makes an offer with the qualifying offer, Charlotte can't match that offer. And I think Charlotte should match any offer unless it's crazy. He's a guy who should probably be making around 14 million. I think he deserves it. Like I said, he's going to help this team defensively. He's still very young. Still has a lot of potential, a lot of room to grow. He looks to me like could be somebody like an Aaron Gordon eventually. In his best years, which is a solid piece for this team, the way this team is designed, with a lot of shooters and a lot of guys who can play ISO. He would be a great guy. So, this is a guy who obviously they want to extend, and he plays really well with LaMelo on the floor, and it seems like they built a really good friendship, which is important to keep those guys around because, they help with the team chemistry, and this is a team that, has great team chemistry. They always seem like they're having fun. They're always playing well together when they're all on the floor and healthy. So, a big deal for this team, in my opinion, to re-sign Miles Bridges, and that's a must. One guy I think that's really surprised a lot of people, it's his second year in Charlotte, is Terry Rozier. A lot of people coming into his first year in Charlotte last year, with the absence of Kemba Walker, when Terry Rozier got moved from Boston, didn't really know what kind of player Terry Rozier would be when he had to take over more of a role of, this is closer to my team than he ever has been, right? It's not necessarily his team. Even last year, I wouldn't necessarily say it was his team, but he was a guy who last year had to take a lot more shots to win games than he did in Boston. And, last year he struggled at times really shooting the ball efficiently, but this year he shot more efficiently. He's still showing signs of lacking playmaking at times. That could improve. That could help his team if he could play make. But you have so many other ball handlers on the floor. So really the playmaking doesn't really need to be at the highest level for Rozier. But we know he's a solid defender, and we know he can really score the basketball from all three areas of the floor. The three-point line, mid-range, and take it to the rim. So he's a guy who's been huge for this team. He's poured in 40-point performances, and he's a guy who's averaging almost 20 a game this year for this team. So he's been really consistent this year for this team on both ends of the floor, and he's been a guy who, come playoff time, we've seen him hit big shots for Boston, and hopefully if Charlotte's able to get to the playoffs, he can do the same for Charlotte come playoff time. So, I talked about the LaMelo injury, and LaMelo's not the only guy that's gotten injured. There's two more guys that have had injury issues with this team this year. Devontae Graham has had a lot of injury issues with this team. He's been in and out of the lineup. When he's healthy, he's obviously a guy that this team needs because he affects the game. Now he's coming off the bench for this team, but he's shown he shot a little weak at the beginning of the year. Poor percentages, just inconsistent. But, after the struggles, towards the second half of the year, he shot much better. He's been much more efficient, and we know he's a solid playmaker, and he's a guy who brings a spark plug off his bench for this team. So obviously they're going to need him, come playoff time. So, he is expected to return pretty soon. So that's really good news for Charlotte. He's been out for a little while. And as I mentioned, he's in and out of the lineup a lot. So hopefully he can stay fully healthy when he returns this time and give this team, 100% of his health and just really help this team, bring a spark plug off the bench, as I mentioned, because this is a guy who kind of took a lesser role this year. His rookie year, this is his third year in the league right now. His rookie year, he didn't play well at all, didn't really get a lot of minutes, wasn't really known to many people. And last year, second year, he really stepped up, almost won most improved player. So, lost it to Bam. I believe he came in second. So he's a guy this year who's also taken another step back again. Not again, he's taken a step back because, you bring in a guy like LaMelo, and Terry Rozier has really stepped up his game. I think it made it tough for him at the beginning of the year because last year he was so used to kind of almost being the guy on the team. So now that, I think he's developed into that benching role before he got hurt, it's really helped this team because, as I mentioned, he's been more efficient. So a big plus for this team when he comes back. Another guy I really want to talk about, we're continuing with the injury thing with Charlotte, is Gordon Hayward. We know he's been out now for about 4 weeks with a sprained foot, and he's expected to come back soon. They're obviously expected to have him back for the playoffs. That's the timetable for a return for Gordon Hayward. So we know Gordon Hayward's played great this year. He's been the best player on this team all year. He's showing flashes of kind of how he used to play in Utah. He's shooting the three ball really well. He puts the ball on the floor. He can get to that mid-range area. He's shown a little more athleticism than he did in Boston for all those years. And he's also, shown the ability to get to the rim, get to the free throw line, do things like that. And he's a very underrated playmaker. He can bring the ball up the floor, get a bucket for himself, or even help other guys, get to their shot. Gordon Hayward, as I mentioned, has been the best player for this team. He's been the go-to scorer for this team. So, you've seen, how much this team has hurt since him and LaMelo have been out. So, obviously, when they get those two guys on the floor together, LaMelo and Hayward play really well together. And they're going to need Hayward come playoff time, because he's going to be the guy who is going to have to go and get them a basket when they need it the most. And when you put him on the floor with this team, he's a serviceable defender. He could work on that end of the floor, but he's serviceable for now. it gives this team another level of scoring, right? It allows this team to take their scoring to another level and have more options. And, lately they've just been going to Terry Rozier and Miles Bridges and guys like that, right? And that's not a problem. That's fine. It's just when you add Gordon Hayward, it will give you even another level of scoring and help this team even more on the offensive end of the floor. One more thing about Hayward really quick. I think one interesting thing about Hayward was, the contract situation this past offseason. Charlotte gave him a 4-year, $120 million deal, and a lot of people were really skeptical about that deal. He's 30 years old. He'll be, 33 years old, or he'll be 34 years old, when he becomes an unrestricted free agent. So, this contract is still really debatable. And if you ever get in a tough situation with Gordon Hayward, he's not playing at the highest level where he gets injured even more than he has now because he obviously has, an injury history. It's going to be a hard contract to move. But if he's able to stay healthy, the contract might be worth it. As crazy as that is, he's making $28 million this year, and then he goes up $1 million each year. So it's tough. Obviously this was a guy who was the best player on this team this year when he was healthy, and he helped his team. At one point they were a 6 seed, I believe, maybe even 5. So he was one of the big reasons why that team was there in the first place. And since he's been injured, this team is obviously, taking a hit record-wise and taking a hit just performance-wise. So we'll see. I think we just need Gordon Hayward to be healthy to be able to tell if he's really worth that contract. So that will be something to also keep an eye out for. One guy I forgot to talk about with injuries with Charlotte was Malik Monk, who recently made his return a couple of days ago. And, this year I think has been his best year in the NBA. He's shooting 43% from 3, which is crazy because this is a guy who never shot anything close to 36% in his career before from three-point range. He's been a guy who we've looked at kind of, in his 4th season now. We've looked at and said, okay, this is a guy who can score the ball. He has unreal ability to score the ball, but he's just not the best shot taker, and he's really not consistent. And this year he's kind of, he's proved those people wrong. Like I said, he's shooting 43% from 3, and he's shooting 46% field goal, which is unreal for someone like him, really for anyone especially, but for someone like him, it's crazy because he is a guy who has taken his game this year to another level in terms of his IQ and his shot-making ability, right? He takes much better shots. He's even shown a quicker first step this year, which is crazy because we knew how quick his first step was. And he's just, like I said, he's just been a smarter player, which has really helped his team. He's given this team 21 minutes a night a game. He was given this team about the same last year, but these minutes this year are more valuable because of his efficiency. And, he's been another guy that this team has missed since his injury. And, him coming back, coming off the bench will help this bench, with Devontae Graham even more. And those two work really well together. Him and Graham, pair together really well off the bench. So to see Monk back is big. They're easing him in. They eased him in last night. Not too many minutes against Miami. So they continue to ease him in, again, like they're doing with LaMelo. And then hopefully they get Hayward back soon and they can ease him in. This is a team that, could be a sleeper team come playoff time. They could, I don't think they'll go past the second round, but they could maybe upset a team in the first round if they're able to make the playoffs and able to win those playing games, which will be tough, but I think they have an ability to do it. So Charlotte's definitely a team we'll keep an eye out on. They've had a lot of injuries this year, but guys are all starting to get back from injuries at the right time, and they should be fully healthy if they're able to make the playoffs. So Charlotte may be a team that a lot of people may be sleeping on too much, and I'll be interested to see what they do in the playoffs because it's a really young and exciting team to watch, and the future is nothing but bright for this Hornets team. So that's going to wrap it up for the Hornets segment, which means that will wrap it up for episode number 8 of the NBA podcast. And make sure to also go check out the football podcast that I posted 2 days ago about the draft. It's episode number 1. It's a great podcast that just really talks about every team's grade and everything. But make sure you follow the Instagram page if you haven't for both the football and the basketball. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast.